All right, so I use Adobe Bridge to upload and catalog my images. So I've got my image here in Adobe Bridge. I'm right-clicking on it. I'm going to hit Open in Camera Raw. Now I use Adobe Camera Raw to edit all my images. I know a lot of you out there use Lightroom because it's where you're comfortable, but I really encourage you to check out Camera Raw. It is the exact same interface. It's just organized slightly different. Got all your sliders over here, panels, and then you've got your brushes and your filters up here. It is pretty much the exact same thing, so you're not missing a whole lot. So I'm going to go ahead and start on my edit here. And I know I want to bring up my shadows because it's way too dark down here. I'm going to bring up my blacks for the same reason. Now I want to bring up my whites. Now that's way too bright. It doesn't even look like a cityscape anymore. So I'm going to bring down my exposure. I got my whites up too high here. I want to bring down my highlights because I can see right here it's blowing. So I'm going to bring those way down. Play with my, oop, went too far there. My white some more here. All right, I feel like that's a good start. I'm gonna add in just a little bit of vibrance here. And I think I'm gonna take the sharpening off of this. I think for right now that this looks pretty good. You could play around with the color just a little bit, warm it up maybe just a little bit, and take away a little bit of the magenta here. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and hit open image, and it's gonna bring my image right into Photoshop. It's thinking that's the before I have pulled up for you guys there. All right, so now we have our image in here. One of the things I want to point out about this image is look at all of these spots. So this image was shot through a window, and because I had, a really small aperture, I've got all of my spots showing. So I'm going to take a moment here and take out as many of them as I can. And how I'm going to do that is with my spot removal tool right here. You click on that and you just click on it. I'm just going to take out the big ones that are real dark and noticeable. So I'm going to pause that while I. All right, so I've gone ahead and removed quite a few of them. There's still a ton, but I'm going to do a lot to cover them up later. So we will come back to those. So I've got my landscape action set here, and you guys can purchase that separately, or you can enroll in my Photoshop course and it comes with the course. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit my HDR action, hit play. What you can see that that's done is it's really brightened up the city part of my images, which is what I was hoping that it would do. I think it's a little too bright, so I'm going to come and play with the different layers. I'm going to just play with the opacity of this one. Go leave it right around there. I think that looks good. I actually think this one looks good too. So now I'm going to go ahead and flatten it. I'm going to go to my background and hit Command-Shift-E. Control-Shift-E if you're on a PC. Anytime I say Command, it's because I'm on a Mac. If you're on a PC, you just substitute Control. All right, so from here I'm going to play, I think, a little bit with the colors. I'm going to come down here to my warm and cool actions, and I'm going to hit warm highlights. I want to warm up my highlights. All right, so you can see what that's done. It's really, made the yellows in this pop, the pinks in the skies. Make sure I like it everywhere. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I'm just going to leave it how it is, I think, and go ahead and flatten it. And then I could also try play around with my shadows if I wanted. We could hit cool shadows to add kind of a contrast between the warmth and the cool. I sometimes like to do that. So I'm just gonna barely add a little bit, so 24%. I think that looks good. I'm gonna flatten it, Command-Shift-E. So I've got my colors where I want. Now I'm gonna play around with my sky. I've got all these sky actions, and they're really great because you can just paint them on. So I'm gonna go ahead and select the Paint on Pink Sky, hit play. And I've got to come over to my layers over here, and I have a black layer, so that means I need a white brush. So I'm gonna come over to my brush, and down here you can see the colors of your brush. You can switch between black and white by hitting D and X. So now I've got my white brush selected. It's at 99% opacity. I've got the hardness way down, and I'm gonna just go ahead and paint my sky. All right, now that's just a little too much. It's a little too wow, too colorful. So I can play around with the opacity of it. I can also click on this and play with the color a little bit. It's color balance adjustment layer. So I don't like all the blue that's going into it. So I'm gonna bring the blue back just a little bit and switch it to my highlights, and maybe add in just a little bit of yellow to the highlights. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, I really like how that made the sky kind of come to life. So I'm gonna go ahead and flatten this. I know some people will like to have just a ton of little steps going along, but if I know I'm done with it, I just flatten it, because there's sometimes when you run an action that it won't allow you to because of the steps that it needs to take. So I like to just kind of keep on top of it. And you can always come back in your history and click on anything to go back to where you were. So now I kind of want to make these lights and the light trails pop. So I'm going to come back to my actions here, and I'm going to, where is it? I'm going to hit paint on highlights, because these little lights are highlights. So I'm going to click on that. And now I want to get my white brush. I want to go ahead and paint where there's lights, and I really want to emphasize that. All right, let me show you what that looks like. It's really made those lights pop. It's a little bit too much, so I'm just going to take it down just a smidge. There, that looks really good. And I still don't think I'm kind of done making my highlights pop. So to further do that, I'm going to hit Command-J. And I'm going to come over here to my Dodge tool and have my highlights selected. And I've got it at 15%. So I'm just going to go over a couple of these spots where I really kind of want it to pop just a little bit more, like specifically these light trails. And now I am just dodging the highlights here. All right. You see that really kind of made those trails pop. I'm going to go ahead and flatten it. Now I'm going to try to, mask out some of these spots. So I'm going to hit Command-J to duplicate my layer. I'm going to come up here to Filter, and I'm going to go back into Adobe Camera Raw. So I selected Camera Raw Filter. And now I want to come over here to the Details tab, and I'm going to use Noise Reduction. Noise Reduction removes, grain in your images. Like if you had shot at a really high ISO, then it would help remove some of the grain. And so I'm hoping it'll have the same effect on all these spots on the windows. So I'm going to go ahead and just crank it all the way and hit OK. All right, now you can see that's already made a huge difference. It's kind of softened my whole image. So if I didn't like that on certain spots, I can add a layer mask by clicking the little box with the circle, and then coming over with my black brush and I'm on dodge still, painting over, the areas that maybe I'd want the detail back in there. Like let's say this building. All right. So there's still quite a bit of little spots. I'm probably just going to post this to Instagram or, Facebook. So it's not really important that I get every little spot because you're not likely going to see it, but they're still bothering me just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and select my paint on blur action and hit play. And now I'm going to come in with my white brush and paint some more blur onto the sky and see if that helps mask this a little bit more. I got to be careful because I've kind of painted some on the building here where I don't want it to be. And so I could always duplicate this again. So just hit Command J, and then it's going to add even more blur to it. At this point, I think it's looking pretty good, and I could just come in with my spot remover again and just pick up some of the spots that are still there and really noticeable. And there's one other little action I could try. I've got my high pass filter, which just kind of adds like a dreamy, blurry look to your image, which is really common. You see a lot of it in landscapes. I'm gonna go ahead and hit that. Now that really covered it all up, but it also kind of made the rest of my scene look too blurry. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit Command I, and what that does is invert it. And now I'm gonna get my white brush and paint it onto the sky. All right, so now that looks a lot better. I'm comfortable, with posting that online. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. All right, so one thing I want to do is kind of play around a little bit with the perspective of this image because I feel like I shot it with a wide angle and I feel like some of it's just not, like I feel like these buildings don't look right. I'd like them to be taking up more of the sky. I'd like to kind of move this over. I want to get rid of this little sign over here in the corner. And to do that, I'm going to hit Command J and duplicate my background. Then I'm going to hit Command A. And what that does is it selects all of my image. And then I'm going to hit Command T, which is to transform. And I'm going to right click and come down here to warp. So now what I can do is I can drag any point of my image. And like I just want to make these buildings stand up just a little bit straighter and taller because I feel like my wide angle kind of distorted them. And I want them to be more present in my image. And then I also want to move this building over just a little bit so it kind of fills the frame. And I want to get rid of this sign, so I'm just going to move all of this over just a little bit. And you got to be careful to make sure that everything still looks level. And I think that looks pretty good. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is click on this button up here saying, yep, I'm all done. And then I hit Command D to deselect. Now I would come over here and get my spot removal and just try and take this little sign out. It's bothering me. I didn't do a real great job of covering it up there because there's some reflection from the window. So I might just, crop out just a little bit of it. There, that looks better. And from here, I don't know. Well, I think there's one more step I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and add in a little bit of contrast. And I'm going to hit Contrast Pop. And I think that that's too much, so I'm just going to go ahead and adjust the opacity. And what this is it's just a blending mode. It's on soft light. Right around 15%, I think looks good. So let's go ahead and, take a look at what we've been able to accomplish. So that is our finished image, and that is the before. You can see it's a huge difference. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. And if you want to purchase my actions or my Photoshop course, you can find that in the link below.